Bert! Get him! Yeah! Ron Babe was right.
I'm feeling spry. Well, that's it. That's a wrap. Put a bow on it. 2025 is in the rearview mirror. Well, I mean, if you're listening to this tonight, okay, I might be a day premature, but, you know, I've been premature in the past, and I'll continue to act premature the rest of my life. So I hope you had a great 2025. I had a great 2025. Ups and downs, scares and trauma, but you know what? Got through it and wouldn't want it any other way. No more than I'd want a different title sponsor than Onyx, the title sponsor of this show. No more than I'd want Gunner Kennels to not be my kennel sponsor, or Garmin to be my equipment sponsor, Canine Athlete to be my dog and human focus and energy sponsor. No more than I wouldn't want Mossberg to be my shotgun sponsor, or Boss Shot Shells, or Purina Pro Plan, or Marshwear, or Arxis Boots. Yep, no regrets. No regrets. I hope you give all of those folks a consideration when you're looking for things. I hope you think about going to Watermark Brewery before. I should go down there for New Year's, but we're having family. We're having a delayed Christmas, and they're coming over on it's a long story. We're celebrating Christmas on New Year's. Makes no sense to me, but that's what happened. That's family. You just adjust, right? We all adjust. We adjust to the fact that January 1st, it's going to be 2026. We got dreams, new dogs coming, right? Puppies on the way, maybe puppies ordered. Maybe you're going to start training your own dog a little more next year. Who knows? Maybe you're going to make a trip down to Backcountry Preserve in Glasgow, Kentucky. Have some real fun. I'm going to be down there. I guarantee I'll be back there post-knee surgery. I go in for knee surgery, knee replacement, total knee replacement on the 15th of January. But as soon as that's up to the point where I am not in pain walking, I'm heading back there. I hope to see you there. Or I hope to see you at Watermark Brewery. I can even go there without being totally recovered. I can just sit on a bar stool. They have the best beer, and they sponsor this pot. Well, they sponsor this kennel, I should say. But, you know, can't help but mention them. And I can't thank my Patreon patrons enough for their support in 2025. You know, when COVID hit, I think everybody had a big old boost. Everybody was online more. Everybody was doing it more. And we saw a pretty significant bump. And then it plateaued, and then it flattened out. And it's coming back, too. We've got a lot of exciting stuff for patrons this year. If you don't know what the heck I'm talking about, it's the first time you listen to the show. Or it's the first time you actually listen to the intro, which, by the way, I've managed to do in 2 minutes and 51 seconds, which you know is almost a world record. So, have a great new year. Talk to you soon. I'll have some exciting guests in 2025. And in fact, this episode is kind of something I'm going to do once in a while. And please feel free to write me up and say, Ron, it sucked. Or, Ron, do more of that. I'm serious. Just, it's dog related. I'm not going in. Don't worry. I'm not doing another jiu-jitsu podcast. Okay. Mr. Bordolino. Okay, Bruno. I won't do another jiu-jitsu podcast. But this one's a little different than normal. I hope you enjoy it. I enjoyed doing it. It's kind of out of my normal, it's like reading from a book, but it wasn't. But anyway, see, there I go. Now I'm at 3 minutes and 43 seconds. I'm back to my, it's really bad if people skipped it at their normal rate of hitting the 10-second skip. They're going to be, into the podcast. They're not even going to know the beginning of it. So I'll get off the air and, I'm just going to quit blabbering. I love you guys. I love you girls. I love you patrons more. Bye. Hey, everybody. I hope you are looking forward to or already have had a fantastic New Year holiday. This is a different kind of episode. And in fact, I know I've never done an episode like this. And, after 10 years of putting out episodes, and yes, I have a few repeat guests once in a while, ones I loved and ones I really enjoy talking with, and from what I can tell, you like listening to. I've been doing a lot of digging into archives of dog stories. And, I've got a few dog stories. There's some that I've talked about on the air. The one recently that happened with Tagus last September. I mean, that's nothing short of a miracle. And I started going into an AI dive of dogs. Like, has any other dog ever fell out of a truck? Kind of, I got into this weird world. I wouldn't call it a weird world. I got into a world of dog information that I didn't know existed out there. And I thought it would be kind of cool. I'm going to call this series Dogs Worth Remembering or something like that. And I'm going to probably bring some people on in the future who did write me after that happened with Tagus and hear their stories firsthand. There's a lot of crazy stories out there with dogs. And, if you've been in this long enough, you probably have at least one or two of your own. And feel free to, if it's a great story that we can drag into a half an hour or an hour conversation, write me, But this story I found out about, well, anyway, the AI search led me to this. There's two dogs that were named Taro and Gyro. Now, I may not be pronouncing them correctly, okay? But Taro and Gyro were brothers. They were a pair of Salikian Huskies. I don't know how to say Salikian. It's some kind of northern China and southern Russian Sakhalin. Sakhalin. We're just going to use Sakhalin. Sakhalin Huskies. They were brothers who survived 11 months in Antarctica. 11 months after being left behind by the 1958 Japanese Antarctic research expedition. I mean, picture this. Two dogs, okay? Due to poor weather conditions, the expedition was unable to airlift out 15 dogs, who were left chained with only a few days' worth of food. Of these 15 dogs, 7 of them perished on the chain. 6 of them disappeared, and 2 of them successfully overwintered and were discovered by the next research group going in the following spring. I think I had a good dog story with Zeno. I can't imagine. I don't think any of us can imagine what our dogs would do. Now, I'm sure a few of you have lost dogs overnight. That's probably a real common story. I lost a lot of dogs overnight. Lost a couple dogs for a week at a time. But I had one dog. His name was Zeno. And he used to get under the fence. He would dig under the fence when Hope, a female that he was kind of attracted to, let's say, or at least whatever hijinks she wanted to get into, he wanted part of it. The other dogs never followed. And I've talked about this on some of my Patreon History of My Dogs episodes. But for those of you who haven't listened to that because you're not patrons, Zeno was a liver and white Bronco that I had. He had escaped because of Hope three times totally. Once they both came back, none the worse for wear in a couple hours. Another time, Hope and Zeno took off, and I was out of town. And they came back, and Hope had about 20 or 30 quills in her face. Nothing bad. You could literally pull them out with the pliers or a Leatherman. But Zeno, on the other hand, Zeno was covered. Zeno was from mouth to eyes to ears, and according to my wonderful veterinarian, all the way back to his sheath. For those of you who don't know what that is, you think about it. All the way back to his sheath and his testicles. What Tiffany told me was her only, not to, I feel bad about Zeno because the next story about Zeno is not as good. But she said he either ran over it and killed it or killed it and dry humped it. We'll never know what Zeno was doing. But she pulled hundreds and hundreds. I forget what the total count was. In fact, there was a picture of Zeno in a book. Somebody asked me to send them a copy of that picture from the vet's office. So Zeno was not a lucky dog in that regard. Every time he ran out with Hope, seemed like something would happen. And this goes back quite a few years. They went on another walkabout together, and I tried to put a hot wire around the fence, and apparently that wasn't enough to stop him from going under. And it was a low hot wire. And of course, Hope could just jump over. I'm kind of suspecting that Zeno finally just said, trying to get out under the fence quick, I might just be able to leap over like you did. Whether we'll never know how clumsy it looked or not, but I can tell you Hope could leap over a 4-foot fence or a 5-foot gate, both of which are on our yard here, with the ease of a gazelle. And this time, Hope came back, and Zeno didn't. Zeno was gone for, I think it was a total of 19 days. 19 days. So, of course, we put up posters and we put up flyers and we went on Facebook groups and talked about a lost dog, and we got no response, zero response. Nobody saw the dog. And I kept thinking, well, I mean, he has to be in a ditch, right? Or possibly somebody found him and decided that he was a friendly dog. He loved people. He loved other dogs, so he wasn't one of those dogs that were skittish and wouldn't come to you. Very possible he got picked up and somebody else owned him. Now, I could say that's bad on me. In some cases, a lot of these things that happened, just like what happened to Tagus in September, was ultimately my fault for not double-checking a door and adding an upper and lower lock. So, I think sometimes we're always to blame when we're in the charge of animals. But Zeno was gone so long, I had given up hope. I used to take cruises around the roads and check the ditches, and this was into October, if I'm not mistaken, from memory. Nights were getting cold, but not crazy. And there was a fella that lived not more than 2 miles from my house that found Zeno in his deer blind. And he was being a little proactive. November was coming around the corner, and he had a blind about a quarter mile from his house on his property. And he decided to go back there and, make sure there was no mouse nests or porcupines living in it, or, make sure the doors and windows worked and all that stuff for deer season. Well, as he walked back there, he saw the dog scooting away from there, but he didn't know that the dog was basically living in this deer blind. And didn't think too much of it. And the next day he went back there and he saw the dog again. And still didn't hook up with Facebook or anything like that. Long story short, Zeno, from what my vet can gather, from a full body x-ray we took when we got him back, had got a broken pelvis. Now, more than likely, the dog was clipped on the road by a car, possibly a four-wheeler. We have a lot of motorcycle trails around here. We won't ever know because, our dog will never tell us what happened. Kind of like kids that when something breaks, they look at you like, I didn't do it, It's that one thing we wish dogs could do, and at the same time, we know it's best if they can't tell us everything. And but somehow Zeno survived. Now, with a broken pelvis, it was a fractured pelvis. It was a broken pelvis. The x-rays showed the healed up bones, and you could tell by his gait there was something wrong with his back end. But that dog somehow either crawled or dragged himself to this blind. Now, it wasn't like him to go out on his own, but again, he was out with Hope, and maybe she just skirted across the road and got missed, and maybe he didn't get that lucky. Same thing happened with Zygon years ago, with 2 dogs that I called back in a very huge parking lot. But anyway, when he found the dog was now exhausted. It didn't leave the deer blind when he heard the person coming. Zeno was just laid in there, and I'm telling you what, Zeno looked like hell. I mean, absolutely hell. So some of these things we just don't know, but what we do know is when this guy found him, the dog the dog was all but a skeleton. Now, I have to assume, I know where this place was. There was a creek or a little county drain not far. So, you have to assume, I looked up, I Googled how long can a dog go without food and water. Well, they can go without food for a very long time, meaning if they had plenty of fresh water, they could go for weeks. But they would have to be a perfectly healthy specimen in the first place. So he must have found something crawling around or limping around while his pelvis healed. And it was always a story that I thought, boy, it's not the most, it's not the biggest comeback story of the world, but it was crazy. Where I'm going is back to Taro and Jiro. Here's a dog that was, he was 2 miles from home, figured out he couldn't get back home, but figured out he had to survive, and probably dragged himself to the water to get enough water to drink. Maybe there was a bucket of water there that helped him the first time. I have no idea about, the how he did what he did over those 19 days and whatever scrap of food, or maybe he was just eating grass like bears do when they come out of hibernation. We'll never really know. But my vet did say that he couldn't have possibly lived very much longer. He miraculously did not have any organ damage. He didn't have any liver, kidney failure, anything like that. He was just completely emaciated. He was a literal walking skeleton. And it was a true miracle. I mean, in its own sense. Had deer hunting season not come along, had this guy waited and been a procrastinator and said, "Wow, I got a couple weeks before deer season. I'll go out and get to that blind. At least I'll get out there and check it out." But whatever happened, somehow Zeno survived, and someone who became a friend of mine drove all the way from Washington State to adopt him from me, because with a broken pelvis, we knew he wasn't going to have a long life in the field, and he was going to be part of my breeding program. But with those hips, you could be no way assured with x-rays or pen hip or OFA. The dog was compromised, so he was out of that breeding program idea. And a person who followed and followed the podcast for years adopted him and actually bought another Bronco from me to keep him company. And he lived a very healthy, happy life with limited exercise. But going back to these two dogs, Jaro and Taro. So, the Japanese National Institute of Polar Research, of which I had no idea there was such a group, that would be the JNIPR, began a multi-year research program in Antarctica to coincide with the International Geophysical Year. They established a Showa station on East Ungle Island in January of 1957, and they sent a team of 11 researchers and 19 huskies as a sled dog team. 3 of these huskies died during the expedition. Of the remaining 16 dogs, a white female named Shakuro gave birth to a litter of 8 puppies. Now, I researched this a little bit. I went down a rabbit hole of the Shackleton expedition and all these Arctic expeditions, and didn't even know this until I found this today, that they banned dogs from the continent of Antarctica. And an immediate thing would have been, because they keep dying. They keep falling into crevices. They keep dying of malnutrition. And but no, they actually did it because it's possible that they could bring in a disease or something that they do not want on the continent of Antarctica. So it wasn't out of sympathetic and what would you call it? Human emotion. It wasn't based on the fact that dogs keep dying out there. But so these 2 dogs were out there. Wait a minute. I got to back up. Of the 16 remaining dogs, a white female named Shikaro gave birth to a litter of 8 puppies, bringing the entire dog team at the base up to 24. The team was expected to be replaced in February of 1958, but the ship Soya carrying their replacement crew became iced in and called for help from Burton Island, an American icebreaker. With Burton Island's assistance, a helicopter rescued the team at Showa. The plans to deploy the second year were abandoned, and the helicopter rescue only included the humans at Showa, as well as the white female husky Shikuro and her 8 puppies. The remaining 15 dogs were left, chained, with several days of food accessible. Almost seems a little... I'm going to have to find if there's a book on this that really goes into the dogs. Because you would think, I'm guessing that they left some food there hoping to come back in a couple days, because it would be kind of, you're just extending the ultimate thing if you knew you weren't going to come back for them, but you left them some food. So the dogs were left chained for with several days' food accessible. In January 1959, a third team returned to Showa and sought to determine the fate of the dogs. 7 dogs had died while still chained up. 8 had broken free. 6 bodies were never recovered, but Taro and Gyro were found alive. These were the 2 youngest dogs on the team at 3 years old. They were brothers, and they were pups of the dog Kuma, a dog that had also been on the chain at Showa, but had broken free and disappeared. The dogs that died on the chain showed no signs of cannibalism. I guess I find that comforting and also kind of unbelievable, because I did a little research, and there have been dogs that have cannibalized other dogs, and there have been dogs on sled teams that were fed the meat of other dogs as a last-ditch effort to survive in Antarctica and some of these crazy places that people feel they have to go explore. And there are dogs that have refused to eat the meat. There's other dogs that gobble it up. So those dogs that died on the chain showed no signs of cannibalism. It was theorized that Taro and Gyro survived by learning to hunt penguins and seals and eat frozen marine life that surfaced up into the ice cracks. The dog's survival was a national news story at the time. Gyro continued working as a sled dog in Antarctica and died there in 1960. His remains were stuffed and moved to the National Science Museum of Japan, the same museum where Hachiko is displayed. I don't know who Hachiko is. I'm going to have to dive into that. Well, I did look that up real quick. This is a dog over in Japan that, after its owner died, he continued to wait for almost 10 years following the death of his owner. And there's a whole story. That's another episode we could do. Anyway, Taro was relocated to Sapporo, Japan, and lived the remainder of his life at the Hokkaido University. He died in 1970 and was placed on display at a university museum. There are monuments all over the island to these 2 dogs, Taro and Gyro. Now, can you imagine? Actually, there was a movie. Now, of course, it was a Disney movie, and it wasn't accurate, but it was called 8 Below, and I remember the title, and I'm going to have to watch that. I'm sure it's a bit of a tearjerker, but I think with a Disney, it'll have a happy ending. I don't know if you can call it a happy ending story, but could you imagine what we worry about with our dogs, from getting fence cuts and, possible snake bites or run over by cars, the things that can happen. And we're with them every day. And I can only picture Taro and Gyro. Did it take them 2, 3, 4 days to get off the chain? How did the mother, being one of them, there was 8 dogs that got off the chain somehow. No explanation to how they got off the chain. I don't know what the chain was. Maybe the chains were made out of leather, or who knows? I don't know. It was Antarctica. I doubt it. They must have been steel. Anyway, for 8 of those dogs, and one of them being the mother, those dogs could have worked as a pack for a long period of time, but they never found the mother or the other 5 dogs that got off the chain. They just found the other dogs that were still on the chain and died of starvation. Crazy. And over a year later, those 2 dogs, kind of chokes me up a little bit. Those 2 dogs were still in the vicinity. And for all intents and purposes, one of the dogs stayed there and remained a sled dog. So he was obviously healthy. I mean, picture your little dog or my little dog out there, not injured like Zeno was, just out there. And you think, my God, they'd be scared. My God, but would they be scared? Because, dogs are kind of, dogs are pretty resilient. Not all dogs. I mean, there's some basket cases out there. I've owned a couple of them. I've owned a dog that literally wouldn't come to anybody else but me, which is terrible if you want to talk about lost dog stories. You want that dog, if you got a dog that gets lost, you want that dog that loves everybody, that literally would go into anybody's car, jump up there, and act like they were there their whole lives. I mean, that's what you really want in a bird dog, because if they do get lost, half the battle is getting them back, right? And if they won't come to people and if they stay away from people, there's no recovery. And to think that Taro and Gyro, at some point they saw the humans and they came back after a year on the ice pack. A year. Like, there's never been a dog or a wolf that lived in a situation like this that we have in recorded time. And those 2 dogs came right back to being working dog. One went back to being a working dog, and one went back to living in Japan. It's amazing to me. And I'm going to be looking up stories like this. Not just dogs that survived for a year or dogs that, were gone for 19 days like Zeno. Just incredible dog stories. We're so lucky that wherever this happened, whenever it happened, where the wolves met the humans, and how this all got down to us today, we are so lucky. I think about that. I think about that every time I let the dogs out in the kennel, and Tagus comes over and puts his beard on my left leg, Vivi's up on my lap, and the 2 Broncos are drooling on my right side. And sometimes I get a little ornery with them. I'm like, come on, guys, come on. You're here all day. I let you out. There's a couch. I picked up a couch for him the other day because I go through couches here in the kennel because they'll tear them up and they stink them up and they scratch them up, and I'll just find a couch for $50 at a yard sale. I put it in the kennel. It's wintertime. You would think they would want to get off this floor and up onto this couch. It's big enough for at least 3 of them. And no, they stand there, inevitably, Tagus with his beard on my left knee, and that's after he goes into the bucket and drinks water when he comes in. Vivi up in my way when I'm trying to smoke a cigar, and the 2 Broncos drooling on my right leg. Now, I got to think, after telling you that story about Gyro and Taro, maybe I should just let them dogs sit there as long as they want to. Because there's going to be a day when I'm going to miss these dogs too, and you're going to miss your dog too. But just think about that. A year on the ice in Antarctica. It doesn't even seem possible. Nor does Tagus's fall out of the truck on Interstate 94 in September. And nor does a lot of other stories that I'm going to accumulate over the years and bring them to you on the podcast. So look it up if you want to. It's a pretty interesting story. Taro and Gyro, part of an expedition, left there, and were still there when they came back. Crazy, crazy, crazy.